Video games tell stories. I don't care how cliche it is to say that because it's true. Whether you found the hidden pipe in Super Mario Bros. That your brother didn't, or chose Bulbasaur in Pokemon and got them to level 100, your experience is unique to you and your playthrough. Sure, you could argue that video games have always been like that, but as technology and time has advanced, video games simply have gotten more personalized. Too personalized. Like, why do I have to sign the terms and conditions to play Pac-Man World? Do you guys need my social security number as well? Nintendo consoles in the modern age have simply thrived off of gimmicks that add immersion, like the Miis, which oftentimes you could play as in games like Wii Sports and Mario Kart, and sometimes see in the background. Nintendo consoles are just so wacky. Look at this, a touchscreen? Who do you think you are? And to be fair to Nintendo, they've always been experimenting, dating back to peripherals like Rob the Robot and the NES Zapper. While Nintendo were the primary innovators between these new ideas such as touchscreens and motion controls, it wasn't unprecedented for third parties to sometimes take their swing in trying to push forth gaming innovation. And these outings would range from either complete shovelware to actually very novel attempts that could have been Nintendo games. An example of a company that ended up making the latter a lot was a company known as Fifth Cell. Fifth Cell began with humble beginnings, making flip phone mobile games with THQ at the publisher helm. Once the Nintendo DS was revealed though, they started shifting their attention to the cheeky little handheld. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the DS, 154.02 million of you to be exact. It was the first handheld that had a touchscreen. No. Jeremiah Slaxa, the lead director of the company, would pioneer two new series for the DS, specifically made with its control scheme in mind. I already talked about one of these series, which was Scribblenauts, a game where you could type literally anything on your mind and it would appear. Well, maybe not literally anything. 2 years before the first Scribblenauts game would debut, Fifth Cell's first outing on the DS was released, and this is none other than a scrappy little series called Drawn to Life. The concept was simple: an action-adventure platformer with RPG elements that let you draw your own character and the objects and weapons in the world. It spanned 5 games, with the newest being released in 2020. You know, no one talks about this series. I don't know if it's just placebo or I'm just that out of touch, but I see way less people talking about Drawn to Life than I see for the Scribblenauts franchise. Don't get me wrong, there's still a niche, there's still a pretty decently sized community, but it's something I don't see brought up in passing all that much. So screw it, someone's gotta do it. Someone's gotta dig up these old franchises and give them an old swing, document them, find their flaws, find what's good, and talk about them ultimately. Well, our goal today is to figure out what led to the series' ultimate downfall and demise. It's important we take a little journey of the franchise to figure out just how exactly we got here. Can't look at the end without looking at the beginning too. So let's keep it simple and start with the first game, Drawn to Life on the Nintendo DS. No, it was for the Sega Saturn. Starting up the game, I'm gonna introduce you to a new video game character, you. Me? You are referred as the creator in the world of the Raposa, the little cat creature things. Basically, to them, you're a god. In fact, in Japan, the subtitle for this game was God's Marionette. We start with a mini tutorial that serves as the introduction to our role in this universe and teaches us the core principles of drawing. Now, you might be asking, what's stopping anyone from drawing something inappropriate? Nothing at all. We meet Mary or Marie, I don't know, who do you think I am, a linguist? She begs us, the creator, to help her struggling world. I mean, you can say no. It boots you back to the menu. Alright, productive day. As we can see, this village isn't looking too good. It's gray, it's gross, there's some smoke clouds everywhere. What is this, Los Angeles? Alright, time to draw our character. Draw our character. Okay, we need to sit down. You and I, we're gonna have a little talk, one-on-one. I can't draw. I tried my best for the purpose of this review, but I'm no Leonardo da Vinci. You see this? This is the best you're gonna get and you'll like it. Drawn to Life has a surprisingly engaging gameplay loop. At its most basic level, this game is a matter of talking to villagers, playing a level, talking to villagers, and playing a level. Simple on the surface, but it does have a lot of depth to it. The gameplay is sort of like a hybrid between a traditional RPG and a platformer, which sounds like it would have been done a lot before, but I can't think of many games like this. I guess Super Paper Mario technically, but also not really. To be honest, it's actually pretty novel. The reason we're exploring these levels is to recover the scriptures, which are little pieces of paper that give the ability for the creator to restore the missing objects of our village. Early on, we learn that the reason the village is in a bad state is due to our antagonist Wilfrey, who kidnapped the villagers and is spreading darkness. The reason he's doing all this was because he was salty he couldn't draw his own creations from the Book of Life. Hey buddy, get yourself a DS and a copy of this game. It's all you need. Well, after his molding, Wilfrey threw away all the scriptures from the Book of Life, right out in open paths. To be honest, his motivations aren't entirely clear, but I think he's a good villain. I like that he's just an evil version of the other Raposa, as it gives him a lot of relatability and makes his presence threatening, but not just stupidly evil or anything like that. The story does have a lot of religious allegories, as does a surprising amount of fiction, but for the sake of this video, I think it's best if we don't get too into that. So, what are we talking about first, the village or the levels themselves? Okay, we're talking about the levels. Drawn to Life appears to be your average 2D platformer at a first glance. To some degree, that's what it is. But of course, the main gimmick here is literally drawing some of the objects and scenery that helps you progress through the game. These drawings can range from aesthetics in the village to abilities that you unlock throughout the playthrough. There are many types of platforms for one, and occasionally vehicle sequences, but let's talk about the actual impact of drawing. You're given a defined area where you can draw, typically in a square or rectangle form. What's kind of disappointing is no matter what you draw here, the object is only going to be that entire square no matter what. So if you draw one line but it's at the bottom, you're not going to land on that line. The game will treat it like you filled out the whole thing anyway. This is fair enough if you consider the DS limitations, but I do wish it would just treat it like you didn't draw the whole thing, as it makes the drawing feel a little bit less personable and a bit more like a gimmick. Sometimes I would get kind of lazy and just fill out an entire square just so I knew the exact dimensions of where that block contained, because even a few lines of invisible pixels would mess up my timing when jumping. On top of that though, lots of objects in mid to late game you draw are just filling in shapes and templates, which, don't get me wrong, you can still kind of have some fun with it, but it would have been nice to just be able to draw whatever we wanted. Instead, it kind of comes off like color a dinosaur for the NES. I might be the first person who ever made that comparison.
I hope you're proud of me, Mom.
The drawing itself is serviceable, but it's not perfect. You are given a pretty fair amount of tools here. Brush stroke sizes, a paint bucket, stamps, and different palettes. What sucks about the palettes though is, let's say you want a color from palette 2 that's not in palette number 1, it'll convert every color to be the palette from the second bucket. I have zero clue what this does. The drawing system gets the job done, but what irritates me is there's no shape tool like how Microsoft Paint has. I feel that's a huge missed opportunity. I may or may not be an artiste or anything, but I can at least safely make this claim that the DS touchscreen is not the most accurate drawing tablet in the world, so if you want to make a circle, it's just not gonna happen. Accept it and move on. That being said, I'm sure there are some super talented artists out there who could put this system to good use. I'm just not one of them. Look, I drew Johnny Test. It looks like him, right?
Drawing is ultimately what you make of it. You could spend all day making something really unique and creative, or you could just draw a line and move on with your life. I think that's the perfect way to do it, because I don't think drawing could carry this game all by itself.
In terms of the actual controls, I played much worse, but they're still a bit awkward. To ground pound, you can't just hold down after a single jump. You need to continue to hold the B button while holding down. You can also look down by crouching, one of my favorite features, but it takes like 3 seconds before your view actually changes. I get that this game was released before the first Scribblenauts game, but it would have been nice if they would replicate what that game implemented, which is scrolling over an entire area with the touchscreen with a magnifying glass. Overall though, I never had too many issues with the control scheme. It's a platformer on the DS, it would have been concerning if they did mess it up. Seeing the drawing of your character move in the level is surprisingly fluid. I'm surprised they were able to convert it so seamlessly. You could take 5 hits before you become a skin-colored mannequin. It's a mannequin, okay? Relax.
I knew Wilfrey was evil, but I didn't think he was trying to get my channel demonetized.
The levels themselves are, again, what you would expect out of a platformer, but with lots of reasons and areas to explore. It's important to note, though, these levels are long. There aren't that many of them, excluding boss stages, there are only 15, but as said, these aren't necessarily quick romps. Considering Drawn to Life is on a handheld console, I feel that's a bit inconvenient. You can, of course, just close the DS and pick up later, but if you're the type of person that gets anxious about not having a firm save, then it's important to note that this isn't the type of game you could just pick up and play. Some of these levels were a minimum of 30 minutes, but if I got really stuck on one, it could go up to an hour. In part though, the levels are only really long if you care about the many collectibles and challenges. About half of them are required. These are the scriptures, of course, and the villagers who sit around in the shadow cages. There's also a lot of goo sitting around, which you can clean with the stylus.
I'm currently thinking about a timeline where I knew this was optional.
I despise cleaning this goo. It just takes so long. There's always a shadow enemy sitting around trying to make your life miserable. This means you're constantly going to be putting down your stylus to jump on the enemy real quick, and then you're going to be switching back and forth quite a bit in what should just be an action segment. Switching between the two control schemes isn't a big deal for the most part when it's just for drawing segments, because that's a specific time where you can take a breather and focus on your stylus. As a result, if they wanted these goop sections to be a focus of the game, they should have just not had these enemies pop up. On top of that though, if you really think about it, it's just entirely filler and adds nothing to the game. The last collectibles are these little capsules, such as ability tokens and more drawing tools that can be later purchased in Isaac's shop. These, of course, are the primary reason you'll want to collect the many coins littered throughout the levels. Additionally, in the village, there is also a wishing well that you can plop some coins in to get rewards, like extra lives and songs. Upon putting 10,000 coins in, you're taken to a secret village that houses all the developers. Man, Fistcell just loved putting themselves in their games, didn't they? Here, Jeremiah says there's a flower in Wilfrey's lair. This was later confirmed to be a lie to trick people in a 2020 interview with the Drawn to Life community.
Alright, to make up for this, I put a flower in one point in this video. Leave a comment down below if you find it.
There are 4 worlds in this game, and each one has its own distinct gimmick. World 1, being a snow world, has the snowball gun. World 2 is a forest type of level and gives us wings, which aren't really like wings and are more like a double jump and glide. The third world's gimmick is really irritating though. For one, it's a water level because for some reason, game developers always have to put water worlds in everything, and then gamers always complain. It's an abusive cycle. Well, at least the music's good.
Drawn to Life came out first.
This world's draw is the scuba gear that allows you to swim underwater. You also get a starfish gun, which includes a homing attack for enemies, but there's quite simply not enough ammo, despite it being necessary to progress unless you want to take damage, since it's your only attack underwater. This is a problem because if you run out, you are forced to die to reset your ammo count. World 4, which is a combination of a city and a hell, has 2 gimmicks. One makes you a giant, which is pretty exciting despite just being a visual gimmick, and you also get a sword. The worlds all have varied gameplay and new ideas being thrown around constantly. Some of these ideas are throwaways, but I appreciate them trying to shake things up regardless. For example, there are submarines, hang gliders, rocket ships. Functionality-wise, they may be similar or all not very in-depth, but you gotta give them points for at least trying to switch things up once in a while. Until the very end of the game, too, there's always new objects you can draw. And while I've already said this isn't the most impactful, I do think overall, this is a well-designed game.
Oop, look at the time. It's complaining o'clock, my favorite hour.
Not every level is designed perfectly though. World 2-1 has one of the most pinpoint jumps I've ever seen in a video game, and it's required to progress. Look at this. I thought maybe there was an alternative route or something that I was missing. But the only conclusion I came to was that I needed to jump off this, a squirrel holding a dandelion.
As one does.
The timing of the jump, if you can even get the little rascal to get over here or respawn in the first place, is doable, but very precise. After a while, I looked up a walkthrough, and it turns out you can make the jump with the wings, but it's also extremely difficult. Your choice is either suffering or 99% suffering. Hey Fistcell, how about you guys take some mercy out on your audience, which are kids? In the same world, the game introduces these switches that move platforms. It looks cute on paper, but ultimately it just means you're standing around and doing nothing, which means I have to spend more time contemplating what brought me to this point in my life. Not only is it tedious, but it's really confusing and boring. The same level even has this giant maze-like abomination that's hard to navigate because everything is dark and the corridors are small, meaning that enemies gang up on you. I specifically hate these bats. Why is it always bats with these games? They fly from 10 miles away and are impossible to see off screen, something that specifically made the World 2 boss fight a living nightmare. Speaking of bosses, World 3 boss. You guys want to know my strategy for this one? I fire bullets and pray. I felt like there was no strategy here. It's a button masher at its core. Your fingers versus the elements of nature. The biggest problem is that you move so sluggish underwater. So whenever you die, it just feels frustrating instead of feeling like your fault. The bullets are also incredibly slow and delayed. And like the levels, they don't give you enough ammo here, meaning you're always waiting around for this clown in a cage to throw acorns at you. Come on, man, I'm dying over here. I know you have them. Help me out. Oh, thanks, I died. Thanks.
Hello, my name is John, game developer. We hear that you hate water levels, so we're gonna put them in every game ever anyways.
My last big complaint with the levels is that because they're so big and expansive and with so many collectibles, it can be a bit daunting moving forward in any given area when there are 2 separate paths. I personally started feeling nervous, like, man, if I continue, I'm gonna miss something. With the Raposa and the scriptures, the game will thankfully prevent you from moving forward, but that doesn't account for the tokens and the goo. At worst, it just means you'll you'll need to do a replay or two of a level to get everything.
So yeah, I think this is a really good game by itself, but what makes this experience so special is its unique cast of quirky and lovable characters.
Earlier, I mentioned that the gameplay loop is doing a level, then going to the village and doing tasks, rinse and repeat. What's special about this though is that every group of 3 villagers you save are usually the ones you'll get to meet and interact with in this downtime. This works so well because it really gets you acquainted with these characters in chunks, and there are so many that I love. There's Farmer Brown, gee, was Farmer McDonald taken? We have, of course, Isaac the shopkeeper, we have Chef Cookie, Count Choco, we even find a human. His name is Mike. I don't think I would care so much for this game's cast if it wasn't for this gameplay loop. There's so many of them I haven't mentioned yet, and they don't all add to the story to be fair, but who cares? Look at these little guys. Lots of repose to talk in different dialects too. I have no clue what this guy is saying, but he's supposed to be crazy, so it's alright. Maybe he has rabies. I just love the absurdity of it all. Some have normal roles such as Dr. Cure or an annoying kid, and this was the same sort of thing I really loved about Luigi's Mansion's Portrait Ghosts. The relatability, it's a great thing in games. It doesn't take itself so seriously though. On the inverse, you have Dracula. One bizarre stereotype. There's an Indiana Jones parody and pirates.
Man, what wacky shenanigans, am I right?
At the end of the day, this whole game is just oozing with charm.
Oh man, I got some of it on my shirt.
You know what I love? I just love how the character's dancing around in the music. He's just vibing. He's just vibing out here. I have no other comment. It's just, he's dancing. Or how about the kid NPCs occasionally say a little line?
Papa, Papa, bye-bye.
That is so adorable. At one point, you have a snowball fight with your villagers. I lost instantly, but the idea of it is just so charming to me. This whole game has such dark undertones for the most part, with so many stakes to save lives and ultimately the world. But yeah, let's just have a little snowball fight. It's a reminder not to take life so seriously. In times of despair, there's always gonna be moments where you smile and have fun. I feel like just having a mini game exclusively for world building is such a precious moment, and this is something that games don't do enough nowadays.
Funny enough, I actually did play this game as a kid. I was maybe 7 or 8. I remember beating it, but when I replayed it for this review, this is one of the few things that I distinctly remember, and I think that's because this moment is meant to be so special. Or I'm overthinking it and it was just meant to be some throwaway, but if you think that, you're no fun.
The world building doesn't stop there though. As I mentioned earlier, you can also occasionally draw objects to add to the village once you find more pages from the Book of Life. And shamelessly promote your YouTube channel. I'm a YouTuber, I gotta do it, relax. The best characters of this universe though are hands down Mary and Joey. It's not especially clear what their dynamic is. They're sort of like best friends that might love each other, and I respect the low-key nature of it. These are such interesting characters. I can't really put them into any stereotypical character role. You have Joey, he loves adventure, he's impulsive as heck, but he's a good mixture of comic relief and the straight man. Mary, though, is a character that I don't think I've seen written in a game like this before, and her story really resonated with me. I don't know why it did, I have nothing in common with her, but I liked it, okay? To keep it simple, midway through the game, while at her secret spot, she's told by her father, who's coincidentally the mayor, that one day, she'll be the mayor. Throughout the rest of the story, she struggles with the thoughts of being responsible for an entire village of people. I can't say I blame her. If I had to deal with vampires, thieves, and pirates, well, I'd be salty at the gene pool for making me a mayor's daughter. I wanted to be an archaeologist. She's a great character, though, and arguably is the main character of the entire franchise. I do think sometimes the village segments are a bit too long-winded. It's not like every moment of hanging out here is roses and cherries. Sometimes you have to do minute tasks, like hunting someone down, or walking to this eternal flame that lets you blow away the clouds, and ultimately there can be a bunch of text mashing and debatably padding. It's not the biggest deal, but I gotta be honest, there were times where I was just kind of bored and wanted to get to the next level. Chapter 4 is where things really ramp up. The mayor dies. At first, I thought this was temporary, like this is a cute little kid's game. He probably just fainted. But no, he died at the hands of Wilfrey, no less, who now has the Book of Life. It's a really powerful moment, and you can't help but feel bad knowing that Maria's been stressing about this moment her whole life. Or like, you know, the past 2 or 3 hours of gameplay, but you get what I mean. What makes this moment so especially memorable, though, is that this cutscene happens right before you enter World 4-3, the last traditional level of the game, but you can't do anything about it. You gotta play, you gotta move forward. It adds a lot of tension and stress to the moment. Upon coming back, you face emotional abuse. You should have protected him.
What was I supposed to do?
You're useless, Jeff.
Alright, you know what? You help yourself, you ungrateful jerk. Shut up.
The entire last world is simply fantastic. For one, the levels here genuinely become difficult. It's not Cuphead or anything, but you do have to be decent at the game, and often when you die, it feels fair. This level is called Windy Hills, but I'm pretty sure it's just hell, and they couldn't call it that in the game due to the ESRB. Alright, we have to talk about something though. The second to last level is labeled 4-3, and then when the next level starts, it's 4-5.
Hey, how you doing? I'd like to return my copy of Drawn to Life for the DS.
According to the cutting room floor, there was a code in the game for another level in this world, so I'm guessing they just forgot to change it, but it made me think there was a secret level or that I was missing something. And in reality, they done fricked up. The final fight against Wilfrey. Oh man, I'm not gonna lie, this took me forever. It's a surprisingly difficult battle and really reminds me of something you'd see in an NES game like Castlevania. You have to sit down and memorize the patterns, and even then, get good, it's genuinely difficult. The first phase is against a giant scorpion, who I guess Wilfrey just has sitting around. It's a video game, not everything has to make sense, just deal with it. To beat it, you have to spar with him until you can push him all the way back, timing your sword swings in the process. But these little bouncy pads messed me up more times than I can count. These were definitely placed just to be cruel, and I don't appreciate that. The second phase has no checkpoint, so get used to destroying the scorpion because that second phase is brutal. Wilfrey throws objects that you created, which is a nice touch, but man, I wish I didn't just draw a skinny little line for whatever this was, because I'm getting hit by thin air sometimes. This phase kind of frustrates me because sometimes Wilfrey will take lots of damage, and sometimes your sword just goes right through him, and I don't know why. The game ends with us placing the final page in the Book of Life with Marie accepting her role as mayor. Joey goes off on his adventure. Roll credits.
What's the use? Anyway, I lose, and there's nothing I can do. Wanna know the truth? Yeah, I do.
I can't even make a funny joke with this one. While this game is no masterpiece, I wouldn't be offended if someone called it one.
Drawn to Life is a fantastic game. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't put it above like a 7, but I think this game does something unique that franchises like Super Monkey Ball or Jak and Dexter also did. It has parents and casual gamers thinking it's made by Nintendo. It's a very well-crafted game with lots of love, care, and attention, and it's definitely worth a playthrough.